Anora follows the heavily Brooklyn-accented titular character Anora, played by Mikey Madison, a stripper and occasional escort who meets Ivan, the son of a Russian oligarch. After a decent connection, Ivan pays Anora to be his girlfriend for a week. Looking at a huge payout and enjoying her time with him, she agrees, leading to a whirlwind romance and Vegas elopement. This is a movie that has been in the talks for the upcoming awards show season since it premiered at Cannes and won the highly sought-after Palme d'Or. This movie is written and directed by Sean Baker, who also worked on Tangerine, The Florida Project, and Red Rocket. He is a filmmaker I always look forward to. While I haven't completely connected with all of his projects, he is always doing something interesting. He and director Andrea Arnold, in my opinion, are the leading filmmakers of modern neo-realism. Their grounded approach to real-life storytelling is always compelling. One of the biggest talking points of this movie has been Mikey Madison's performance as Anora, and it is well-deserved. She gives one of the best performances of the year and elevates the writing of the character to be more memorable. Mikey brings a significant amount of depth to this character with her performance, capturing the hard-headedness and naivety of Anora, while believably playing the highly emotional scenes in a way that sways the audience's emotions very quickly to be on her side. When Anora and Ivan get married, the information gets back to his parents in Russia. They quickly send their local handlers, Toros, Garnek, and Igor, to Ivan's house to annul the marriage before it becomes a bigger issue, setting the conflict of the movie into motion. This is a film that I've been excited for, mostly because of the Oscar buzz around it, and after sitting with my thoughts for a minute, I am still conflicted when it comes to my overall thoughts on Anora. I do think this is a good movie, and I can understand why it's getting the buzz that it is, but I don't think it's as good as people have been saying. At the very least, what it tries to go for doesn't always work for me. But before I get into my issues with the movie, I want to go over what I did like. Along with Mikey Madison, the acting from the supporting cast is really great here. Most of these actors I've never heard of before, and they all balance the comedy with the drama of the story really well. And I really am sorry if I mispronounce this actor's name, most notably Karen Karagulan as Toros, whose anxiety over Ivan's mistake is hilarious, understandable, and at times frightening. Sean Baker's direction is commendable. He once again brings his realist filmmaking style to this project with no real score other than a soundtrack, a mostly handheld camera for an on-the-ground impromptu frenetic energy, and a focus on intimate moments between the main character and the supporting cast. The writing is really solid. I think Baker's strength is in his dialogue. The main scene that comes to mind is when Toros arrives at Ivan's house to force the annulment. It's an extended sequence that starts off with lighter stakes and quickly escalates. Baker is able to take a moment from being funny in its ridiculousness of how these characters are talking to each other to a very real feeling of dread when Anora isn't allowed to leave. This isn't a movie that goes down a really dark road, but there are moments that feel like they could go really wrong, and I did like that suspense. And even after that moment of dread, Baker is able to rein it back in and make it funny again. I think this scene in particular is where the acting, direction, and writing works best together. At the very least, it's the most entertaining scene in the movie, and the dialogue is compelling enough that you could see it as being akin to the way that Tarantino would approach a lot of his dialogue. The movie has some really good cinematography throughout. The handheld approach does keep it feeling grounded, but there are some moments throughout this movie where there are some really beautifully composed shots. I think Sean always brings interesting concepts to the table, and this movie is a bit more accessible than his most recent movie, Red Rocket, which is a movie that I thought was well done, but I wouldn't want to watch again because of how despicable and slimy the main character is. And that actually brings me to my main issue with this movie. While I do think Red Rocket is a much harder movie to watch, I did understand the main character, and he was really fleshed out. By the end of Anora, I didn't really understand who Anora was. I'm not going to spoil anything about the ending, but it ends on a very specifically uncomfortable note that felt like it was only done to get people talking. The goal of the ending is that some of the facade drops, and maybe that's the point of Anora. You weren't really supposed to understand her completely, but I also think it's possible that I'm drawing conclusions from something that is actually just lacking depth. Anora is a sex worker. She mostly strips at a club, but from what is inferred, if she connects with somebody like Ivan, she will offer escort services. The main understanding that most people have when it comes to this specific line of work is that you need to be smart about what you're doing. While I don't think Anora is stupid by any means, I do think her characterization makes her come off as surprisingly naive. And here are some mild spoilers for the second act of the movie, if you don't want any spoilers. When Anora and Ivan get married, they are eloping, and you do feel like you're caught up in the whirlwind of fun that they're having. He has a lot of money at his disposal and is throwing it at her and his friends so they can have a good time. She is paid to be his girlfriend for a week, and she likes him enough to agree to it. When she agrees to marry him, there is somewhat of a suspicion that she's doing it for the access to his money and a better life. It is kind of a Cinderella story. When the conflict arrives, though, Ivan runs away, and a significant chunk of the second act sees Anora and the handlers searching for him. During this time, her motivation really does only seem to be that she's in love with Ivan and wants to be with him. I think the choice to just lean into that made it less interesting. I think it would have been more interesting if she had more autonomy as a character, if the audience didn't know why exactly she was looking for Ivan, if she was scared of losing him specifically or his money, and keeping that answer close to the chest until the end of the movie. The fact that she is actually in love with him after a week felt really naive for someone in her line of work. And while love does make you stupid and whatnot, to have this seemingly self-sufficient character and wholeheartedly believe this would work out doesn't really seem realistic. I do think in a less talented actress's hands, the character of Anora wouldn't be as memorable. Mikey brings a lot more depth than the story is actually affording the character. I also didn't like the way a relationship between two characters develops. It starts in a place of potential abuse and fear, then justifies a romantic connection afterwards. I do think these characters are complicated and layered, but for a movie steeped in realistic storytelling, some of these moments felt unrealistic. It reinforces a broken narrative about sex workers that felt really shallow and, to be honest, disappointing. Coupled with the amount of sex scenes Anora is in, it did end up, to me, coming across as more voyeuristic than it did as honest or intimate. And in my opinion, Sean Baker's previous work on Tangerine felt like a more respectful representation of sex workers. It does also try to explore how class and public status affects people like Anora and Ivan on these different ends of the spectrum when it comes to social status. I think it has some good things to say, but it never really explores that as much as I wanted it to when it was brought up. I do think that Anora is going to be a highly debated movie. I think the positive reception will remain mostly the same, but I've seen some interesting takes on it and why people don't like it. I wouldn't be surprised if Mikey Madison is the current frontrunner for the Oscar at this point, but I don't, at the moment, feel like she will win sheerly because of the type of role it is, but I could be wrong. I do think this movie exceeds when it comes to its dialogue, acting, and visuals. It's probably Baker's most outright entertaining movie. The movie did keep me guessing, and I couldn't tell where exactly it was going to go with the story. The character interactions by themselves make this movie worth watching. I think this is an interesting movie, and I do look forward to whatever Sean Baker's next project is. I'm excited to see what Mikey specifically does next. This is a good movie, but I was disappointed by Anora's characterization because of my high expectations for the movie. So I will be rating Anora a B. Now, I am very interested to know if you've seen the movie, if you liked it, if you didn't like it, what did you specifically like? Do you agree with any of my takes on the characterization of Anora? Let me know, and I will be back with another video.